Intervento di Alan Muse, che è il responsabile del RICS UK per il Build Environment e per il BIM.
Thank you very much, Umberto. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and it's my great pleasure to be in Milan and supporting the BIM advisory group. I want to talk to you today about some of the lessons learned from the UK in terms of the government level 2 mandate, which some of you may be aware was mandated in the UK by the UK government and really pushed building information modelling, or BIM, along very quickly. I think there are some lessons to be learned in terms of other invoking BIM in other countries around Europe, and I want to talk about some of those issues today. So my agenda really is the client issue for BIM, because that really drives the market in terms of demand for BIM. What do clients really want from BIM? And what is the current state of the art in terms of BIM for clients? And then I want to talk about some of the RICS guidance notes that we produced to support building information modelling and support the introduction of business information, building information modelling into business management. I then want to look at some UK evidence in terms of a series of trial projects that were carried out in the UK to look at the implementation of BIM. I then want to talk about some of the international standards work that the RICS are involved in, because I think that these have a good connection to the BIM debate as well on the international arena. And then to conclude by looking at some recurring issues that might be helpful for the development of BIM in Italy. So what do clients really want from BIM? Well, I think much of the debate around BIM, and certainly in the UK as well, and certainly when I go around other countries in the world, it seems to be the same. In Singapore, in Asia, in parts of Europe, in South America, much of the debate about BIM is about 3D design and actually how we improve the design process. And that's fine, because BIM is obviously initially, at least, a design technology tool to improve efficiency in terms of clash detection and coordination of design. But I think to take BIM further, you need to think about the business outcomes for BIM in terms of the interaction of data at a 4D level, i.e. time, at a 5D level, i.e. cost, and critically also at a 6D level in terms of operational efficiency, facilities management and asset management, because certainly in the UK the government saw BIM as providing benefits to the operational management of its whole property portfolio rather than just an improvement of the construction process. So on the slide here I've got some words that resonate in terms of who you're speaking to as a client about BIM. Is it a pluralistic or a unitary client? And what I mean by that, in many governments are obviously concerned with improving the outcome for many stakeholders, and therefore they're a pluralistic client. Property developers who perhaps just want to sell the building at the end of their construction project, I would call her a unitary client. And I think it's one way to divide clients in the BIM world, because if you've got many stakeholders, then there are many more considerations in terms of what you expect from improvement in a technology like BIM, and particularly in terms of the end of the project. But if you're a unitary client, then you may be less interested in those, and you're more interested in efficiencies in the construction process in terms of time and cost. But critically, it's the business management elements that you're still interested in. So I think this drives client demand for BIM. So consultants operating in the construction industry and contractors operating in the construction industry, I think, need to see BIM in a much wider context than just a design tool. And obviously you can be a sophisticated or lay client in terms of whether you've used BIM in a recurring way during framework procurement over many years, or whether you're completely new to the process. And again, I think it's incumbent upon professionals working in the construction industry to have this early conversation with clients about whether BIM is appropriate for their projects and what's involved in invoking BIM. So my premise, actually, in terms of BIM, is that cost, time and quality, if you like, the business management outcomes, are the key issues in terms of the discussion on BIM. So in terms of that point about what is business management, I just want to clarify that I consider it to be project cost and facilities management. So if you like, the separation of management from design in the construction industry is quite important in terms of improving the outcomes, a bit like the car industry did many years ago. And whether it's in-house or outsourced, collaboration and interdisciplinary working are actually key to enabling the major benefits of BIM to be accrued for the project, because in the UK, one of the key issues about BIM was that many other aspects of the construction process need to change in order to maximise and optimise its use, such as early contractor involvement or early supply chain engagement in terms of procurement, or such as looking at the processes where the different consultants involved in a project can perform in much more of an interdisciplinary way rather than operating in a silo mentality. And so the report that I highlight on this slide, the government construction strategy, emphasising a reduction in costs of 33%, a 50% faster delivery and 50% lower emissions from buildings. These targets were all promulgated on the basis that other things in the construction process had to change in order to invoke the benefits from the technology, in order to invoke the benefits from BIM. So it's very much the thinking in the UK that we cannot look at BIM in isolation. And in terms of going back to what clients want from BIM, if you were to look at a construction project in terms of project management, I think this mantra that I've written down here, the right information in the right form from the right person at the right time, no one could argue with. But the issue is that that is what BIM is all about as well, because unless it's providing better information for decision making at each stage in the project, then it's not providing anything at all. And that information needs to include not just design information, but time and cost and operational efficiency information. And it's through starting with the end in mind, as I put in this slide, that we might begin to improve the operational efficiency of the building and the functional efficiency of the building. Because if you take this simple ratio, and this simple ratio is well researched, of 1:430, you know, the costs associated with functional efficiency and operational efficiency far outweigh the capital cost of the building. So this is why the government in the UK was so concerned with designing with the end in mind, because that is where the big money savings in terms of property portfolio and efficiency are obtained, and in terms of infrastructure efficiency are obtained as well. So we produced an international implementation guide, which I believe has been translated into Italian, and I wanted to, in the time available, I wanted to just introduce this guide because I think it's been introduced elsewhere in this conference as well. But it looks at BIM as a technology, it looks at BIM in project delivery and emphasises some of the points I've just made, and it looks at the implications of BIM on organisations. It takes the process, the construction process, and dissects that to show where BIM can be used to provide this right information in the right form at the right time by using staged data drops. And staged data drops are not a new idea, but this kind of structure and systematic way of implementing BIM and projects is quite important if BIM is to be used efficiently and effectively. And back to this point about design, construction and operations, maintenance and refit in terms of cost and the cost of the project and the whole life cycle of the project, and the benefit that's accrued from looking at it from the back end first. So actually what we're proposing here is that business managers, like facilities managers, are involved in the project from the very beginning in order to influence decisions that are taken by the design team as the design evolves at the front end of the project. And in terms of cost management, which is an important component of most large projects, we believe that through interaction of data through standard classifications, and this has been a big debate in the UK, between actually enabling data, design data and cost data to speak to each other, if you like, by having standard classifications across the industry, then this will obviously aid the introduction of BIM and aid the effectiveness of BIM. At the moment in the UK, I'm not sure what the situation is in Italy, but there is a separate design classification to cost classification. We are working to harmonise that system so that when software vendors design BIM software, they can design it with cost and time implications in mind as well as design issues in mind. So we've also produced another note called BIM for Cost Managers, which is how quantities can be generated from BIM models and how these can be applied to cost databases to actually inform the client of cost changes as the design progresses and inform the client of operational efficiency issues as the design progresses as well. And this is very much about the cost manager being involved in the process very early on and having the conversation with the designers at the scheme inception, so that the BIM model that's actually set up is set up to produce the information not only for the design team, but produce the information for the project and cost managers in the form that they require as well. So BIM for Cost Managers is another RICS piece that looks at this in some detail, and perhaps we should translate this into Italian as well. And it provides a visual guide to BIM measurement, again, via the project lifecycle. So in the UK, we have quite a detailed method of cost measurement called the New Rules of Measurement. Now, you may have something similar in Italy, but essentially what we've looked at is a map and a plan of work to enable that to be used at each appropriate stage in the project so that the right information comes out of the BIM model that can be applied to a cost database so that the cost database that's been collected historically using that kind of standard method of measurement can be applied in a way that's consistent across the industry. And we've also looked at, we're also about to publish, probably in about 2 months' time, another piece called BIM for Project Managers, which looks at the implication of BIM on project managers, because actually project managers, the very nature of the art of project management is that they tend to think that technological advance is something that is not necessarily they're concerned with, but we believe project managers are in a unique position in terms of early discussions with the client to really influence the debate about the format of the employer's BIM requirements, the BIM execution plan, and the information delivery plan in order to get these elements aligned with their project delivery plans. So project managers, we believe, are actually key to having the right conversation with the client at the right time about what's expected from the BIM model and setting up the BIM system for the project in the right way. So this guidance note that we've produced explains how these BIM can be introduced into the conversation by project managers and the kind of standards and protocols and systems project managers should be looking at in terms of the introduction of BIM on a project. And we look at some issues here in terms of what we call the sweet spot between a project management layer, a project sponsorship layer, and a project delivery layer. Project delivery layer you could consider to be the implementation of the project. The project management layer is the overview of the project, and the project sponsorship layer generally comes from the client. So unless those three are working symbiotically and together, you never actually probably gain a sweet spot on the project. But what we think is very important here is that BIM as a technology is integrated into that sweet spot, as we call it, in terms of the client, the contractor, and the consultant team. And that can only be done if the BIM execution plan and the BIM technology is designed from the very beginning of the project. I now want to talk a little bit, as I said, about some of the UK evidence. In the UK, the BIM task group that worked alongside the government to nudge the market to achieve level 2 BIM by April 2016, which is obviously now passed, started a number of trial projects with government bodies, and in total these were about 30 projects. So various prisons, hospitals, schools that were going to be built anyway were built in the UK using BIM and using also some of these changes to the construction process that I mentioned earlier, such as early contractor involvement or new procurement systems that involved collaboration from a very early point. So the government was actually quite pleased with the results, because the research that's available from these trial projects showed capital cost savings in a typical range of 10 to 20% plus. Some of the quantified outcomes for the client included faster delivery, better quality and value in use, lower whole life costs and higher client satisfaction. And actually, a lot of these issues were reducing what we call in the UK, I'm not sure what you call in Italy, the performance gap. So in construction, we have a big performance gap between what is designed and what the building actually performs in practice. And that can relate to thermal efficiency and sustainability issues, and it can relate to environmental considerations within the building, etc., etc. But this performance gap was actually reduced through the use of using BIM on these trial projects. So essentially, and put simply, the government got what it thought it was going to get rather than something else, which is quite a problem in construction. And there were many supply chain benefits as well, including, so the social value of construction was recognised, including some of the local employment issues. But the process benefits, which were the main benefits the government was going for, included better collaboration, and innovation and BIM deployment to level 2. So the whole team tended to work better together, using BIM as a catalyst for that change. So in essence, level 2 and some of the trial projects proved or gave the government the evidence that they're now using in order to continue to progress BIM in the UK. And the latest BIM survey that was undertaken in the UK was actually undertaken only a couple of weeks ago. So in the this is the industry overall in the UK, and it's quite an extensive survey. So aware and currently using BIM, 62%. So almost 2/3 of the construction industry is now using BIM in some form in the UK. Just aware of BIM, roughly 1/3. This other question about, is BIM the future of project information? So regardless of what you're doing now, do you consider as an organisation that BIM is going to be important in the future? 78% of the UK construction industry felt that it was going to be important. But as a challenge, and this is really why I'm presenting in this way today, another question was answered. Clients don't understand the benefits of BIM, 72%. So the challenge in the UK is in the private sector. The government understands the benefits of BIM because it has undertaken trial projects, it has got the evidence, it is trying to nudge the market to take up BIM, but private sector clients are still a challenge in the UK. Some large private sector developers in the UK are using BIM and are using it convincingly in a holistic way in UK construction projects, but generally speaking, the smaller clients are still not using BIM. So this is where we need to permeate the market more in the UK. And I'm sure that this is the kind of journey that most economies will go on with BIM. It's very important, in my view, that the government does encourage the use of BIM in the marketplace. And again, in terms of where we are now, we've got possibly in the UK about 8% of firms that I would say are visionary. They are putting BIM at the centre of their business practices. And of course, many of these are large international companies who can afford to make the investment. But I think it's interesting that curve is going up probably quicker than any. So these early adopters are seeing the real benefits. And then what I would call after that industry leaders, they're at probably 24%. So they're almost a third, almost a quarter of the industry are using BIM quite convincingly on their projects. And industry following, 36%. These are people who are using BIM in some form but are still quite frankly, yet to be completely convinced or are not using it in a holistic fashion. And then behind the curve, probably about a third. And a lot of those, as I've just said, are in the private sector. But I think whereas the three curves below the top curve go up quite slowly, the cutting-edge visionaries are seeing real advantages in being first in the market. And I just wanted to introduce this idea of international standards, as I said at the beginning now, because ICMS stands for International Construction Measurement Standards. And this is a standard that has been put together by 45 professional organisations around the world, of which RICS is part. And this standard attempts to standardise the classification of cost for major international projects. So if we begin, like the accounting profession already has done, to standardise the way that costs are measured around the world, then clearly that has benefits in terms of BIM software when comparing major projects around the world. So in the UK, and I'm sure there are examples in Italy, but in the UK we embarked on a major railway project called HS2 linking London and Birmingham, which was a high-speed project. And at the time there was a real paucity of data about whether that presented good value of money to the taxpayer or not, because there was no international comparisons that were really valid. And all the data available was actually international, because high-speed construction had not been really undertaken very much in the UK. So that's an example of where, if we've got an international standard in cost classification, we can compare large infrastructure projects around the world in a much easier way. And it also aids data collection through BIM models. So I think this is an important development. And McKinsey Global Institute have recognised that in their latest research in February 2017. And I just wanted to give you a flavour of ICMS, because what ICMS is a hierarchical data structure for collection of costs across buildings and infrastructure. So it begins to standardise the benchmarking of construction costs on major schemes. I won't go into that in too much detail now, but there's much more available information on a website which I can give you the details of if you want it. And now I wanted to talk a little bit about level 3 BIM, because in the UK there are now two strands of work. There is development of level 2 BIM, as we call it, and by level 2 BIM we mean what we achieved in April 2016 as the survey I was talking about earlier, but the development of that across the private sector is obviously important to 2020 in the UK. But at the same time, the government is looking at research and development into level 3 BIM. And level 3 BIM is obviously a game changer for the industry in terms of widening the debate to the Internet of Things, big data and smart cities. But there is a lot of interesting work going on with level 3 BIM, and just one example of this is that people are looking at blockchain transactions using BIM models. So, for example, if in the early design you decide that it would be a steel frame building, then you may actually be able to commercially transact for that steel frame using the BIM model on a blockchain commercial transaction. So this whole idea of connecting cost and time to design is going a stage further with level 3 BIM in terms of the research and development that's underway at the moment. And I'm absolutely convinced that this will be a game changer for the industry. But we need to get to level 2 first. And I'll go through, I'm running out of time, so I'll go through these last slides fairly quickly, but this is a reiteration of the fact that we're helping develop international standards in BIM, and I've mentioned some of those already. We've also developed a certified manager course in BIM for training, and we have much other training in BIM on our website, BIM for project managers, BIM for cost managers. We're looking at combining data science and surveying in a much more serious way in terms of university accreditation, because we see the development of data science as particularly important in our profession. So we're looking at that, how that affects the qualification of surveyors in the future. And the big issue, I just wanted to leave you with this thought, because The technologists, and we know who they are, have disrupted many industries, including fintech and prop tech, and they will disrupt construction as well. The professions in construction need to talk to the technologists in order to tell them what they need in these technology developments. They need to explain their work processes, and they need to set down their work classifications, so that there is much more of a discussion between the technologists and the professions. So my conclusion is clients want the right measurable outcomes. Business management information and data is the key to providing that for clients, and professionals and technologists need to work together to achieve this, and we'll get the kind of benefits that I've got on that slide. Thank you.